From the CISO Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
Security cameras get spied on. The data sovereignty emperor might have no clothes, and submarine builder springs a data leak. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have selected from this past week's cybersecurity headlines, and now we're looking forward to some insight, opinion, and expertise from our guest, Derek Fisher, Director of Cyber Defense and Information Assurance Program at Temple University. Derek, thank you so much for being on the show, spending your time with us. I got to ask, how was your week in cybersecurity?
I had a pretty first. Thank you for having me on. I had a pretty mundane week. Been wrapping up a book, so I was trying to finish up some work there. Working on a new training course, so doing some recording for that as well. It was, and was playing around with some lab related work. I'm building up some security testing tools that I was playing around with. So wasn't an exciting necessarily from a news perspective, but definitely had my hands dirty and was really plowing through some work this week. So it was busy for me. So
productive and non-destructive
yes,
is the wish for all cybersecurity professionals.
yes,
So maybe we all follow in your example.
yeah.
A big thank you also to our sponsor for today, DropZone AI, the leader in autonomous alert investigation. If you're listening to the show as a podcast, so you're not listening live, remember that next week you can join us and our loyal band of vocal experts on YouTube Live. Do so. Go to CISOseries.com, hit the events dropdown, and look for the cybersecurity headlines week in review image. You can also subscribe to the CISO Series on YouTube, and either way, you will find us each and every Friday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. If you are here live, we want to see your comments in the chat. We will do our best to address them during the show, but they help make the show better. They delight us, they intrigue us, and they make our Fridays. So please come, join, chat, have some fun. You can also send us feedback through electronic mail. Now, we have an address for that, feedback at the symbol CISOseries.com. Send us your thoughts about the show, the news of the week, or really just anything that's on your mind. We'd love to hear from you. Before we jump into the news, just a reminder here that these are, in fact, Derek's own opinions, not necessarily those of his employer or any staff, affiliates, friends, family, or nemesis. We have about 20 minutes, so let's get started. First up here, unpatched flaw in LG surveillance cameras allows admin access. CISO is warning of an unpatched authentication bypass vulnerability in a specific model of LG security camera, the type often mounted on ceilings in commercial buildings, where things you might not want a threat actor to see would be. Approximately 1,300 of these cameras are active and vulnerable to full unauthenticated remote code execution. As CISA points out, this is a critical infrastructure threat, which is not just simply a risk to isolated devices, but potentially endangers facilities that are vital to public safety and national operations. The manufacturer, LG Innotek, is aware of the vulnerability, but it will not patch it because this particular camera is end of life. So, Derek, we actually ran another story this morning on cybersecurity headlines about Dahua, another security camera maker with remote execution vulnerability. But in the case of LG, the situation seems to be exacerbated by the fact that this is an end-of-life product. It's not going to get the patch. As CISA points out, the central role that these cameras play in critical infrastructure, not only as security devices, but as being connected to company networks. Hello, lateral movement. I'm curious, do you think maybe these manufacturers should shoulder more responsibility toward the safety of these expiring products?
I mean, the trickiest part is that this is hardware, right? Software is a little bit easier to, not that it's not that we don't have technical debt when it comes to software, but hardware is a little bit different because you have a full stack product, in a box, right? You have software, you have hardware, all running together, network capability, all running together in one package. So you have a little bit of a different type of form factor there. But I came from Siemens Healthcare when I started getting into security. Siemens Healthcare, if you're aware, they obviously create these large MRI machines, X-ray machines, things like that. Those were not, a 2-year product or a 1-year product. They were decade long. They were designed to be decades in the field. And oftentimes, even today, you'll find these machines running Windows 95. And so that is, and that's true even in the financial industry in terms of some of the hardware and software that runs in some applications. There is that. We live in an environment where these pieces of infrastructure are legacy. They're end of life, and it's a reality. I think the manufacturers do have a bit of a responsibility, but at the same time, putting yourself in the shoes of the manufacturer, how long is that tail? And we used to try to push the idea of maybe GA minus two or GA minus three or something like that, where
Hmm.
we'll let our customers up front know that we're only going to support back two, three versions, and after that, it's done. And so we can try to pursue something like that, but going back to my days of working in a commercial space where the customers would come back and say, we're not upgrading because we can't. This is a money making machine. Sometimes literally, it's a money making machine that we're not. If we upgrade, we have to assume failures. We have to assume costs and all these things, and it's just not. It's not broke, so we're not going to fix it. And so there's this back and forth between the manufacturer versus the consumer, where the need actually is, and where the spend is going to come from and who's going to absorb that cost. I think in cases of these types of critical infrastructure issues, especially, there needs to be some method for moving off of those vulnerable pieces of hardware, whether it's the manufacturer offering some type of subsidized upgrade or some type of path to the GA version or the latest
Hmm.
version. To assume that that the manufacturer is going to go back and push patches to older versions, I think that's just a fairy tale.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. When these things happen, it's easy to look at the manufacturer. I think there needs to be one, an upfront obsolescence right plan, like you were saying. Like you should know the roadmap before you even install this thing to know, what your exposure is going to be. And I do agree there needs to be a pull ripcord in case of critical vulnerability on both sides, so that you're not caught. Neither side is caught flat-footed with this. But this seems to be an increasingly relevant conversation as we are now living with, essentially network computers living in physical space for coming up on 3-4 decades now, depending on the hardware. So,
Right. And I think there's also the we can architect around some of these devices, knowing that at some point they're going to go end of life. We need to reduce the blast radius. We'll talk about segmentation and zero trust, I'm sure, because that's a constant theme. But you know, you have to ask yourself who's going to implement that, right?
mhm,
You're asking potentially some of these systems that maybe have an IT team of one person, right?
yeah.
And so they're going to architect and build out these systems that are going to protect these devices, and that's a bridge too far in some cases. So
All right. Well, next up here, Microsoft cannot guarantee data sovereignty. Executives
what?
from Microsoft France said their company cannot guarantee data sovereignty to customers in France and, by extension, to the wider European Union due to the Cloud Act, a law that gives U.S. government authority to obtain digital data held by U.S. based tech corporations, irrespective of whether the data is stored on servers at home or on foreign soil. It is said to compel these companies through warrants or subpoenas to accept the request. This appears to be a major story that will likely fly under the radar. It's pretty wonky policy wise and will lead to, I'm imagining, a great deal of litigation, especially considering as AWS, who supported the bill along with Microsoft and Google, you may know them as the big three cloud providers, stating that the Cloud Act does not only apply to US headquarters companies, it is applicable to all electronic communications service or remote computing service providers that do business stateside. The second quote from AWS is no trifling piffle either. So, Derek, what's your take on this trifling piffle or a piffling trifle?
This shouldn't be any surprise to anybody, right? So we know, when I was doing some reading on this, I remember thinking about when I was growing up, we had the landline phones in the living room or in the kitchen, and the joke was always that the FBI is tapping into your phone, right? And they're listening in. It's like nobody's that important, but back then it was like this big, that was the joke, right? Everyone's phones are being tapped. The reality is that today the the data is just everywhere, and the reason I make that parallel between the wires being tapped by the FBI is because it was a very confined, like, okay, my phone, right? That's it, and as long as I keep my, conversations off the phone, I'm fine. But today it's like, are you you don't even know the different tentacles that the services that you're using, where it's making API calls, where it's storing data. Is it transmitting over, a global network just to come back, back into the US? I mean, or vice versa. If you're in Europe, if you're in Germany, the data that is being processed there, is shooting around the world and touching many different endpoints, being cached in certain places. So, the one comment that I saw while reading this article was that, you know, the ask was, can you confirm that, the data that European citizens' data would never, touch a certain endpoint? And I believe it was a rep from AWS said, no, I can't guarantee that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, all of us that work in this industry and know that you cannot make those kind of guarantees that the data that's being produced in a certain area will always reside in that area, given the interconnected, type of technology that we have. And I think we're seeing this rise of digital nationalism, where nations are going to start. I mean, we already have nations that are doing this, but nations are going to start just creating their own internet, their own networks and their own services, and it's going to be, if you want to truly keep your citizens' data from traversing outside of your nation's boundaries, digital boundaries, that's the lengths that you have to go to. And I think there's been plenty of examples of that in Europe, where their companies are coming up with those solutions and selling them and making good money off of it. So.
Yeah, definitely a trend to keep watching, and as we get kind of, I don't even want to say more clarity, but more action along that trend, right? Of that kind of digital national or digitalized nationalism. I love that phrase. Yeah, we will see if that continues to make waves as these types of issues continue to be relevant. And as Devin pointed out in our comments here, yeah, it looks like GDPR fines are on the way, or revisions to GDPR, to be quite frank, with some of that stuff. I think there's going to be some push pull on both sides with that as
But
well.
there was a point about the GDPR fines where companies are taking on, there's two sides of that. It's either I take on, whatever X percentage of GDPR fines or other, regulatory fines I may take, or, if the U.S. government comes in and says you have to hand over this information, a U.S. company is not going to say no. They can't,
Yeah.
right? I mean, we've learned that through the Patriot Act, and now, throughout time since the early 2000s, that, like, if the government comes knocking, you have to turn it over, whether we like that or not. So.
Yeah, don't envy any digital privacy officers
Yeah.
these days. All right, next up here, French submarine secrets surface after cyber attack. Hackers calling themselves Neferpitu, a name that might cause manga nerds sitting up a little straighter if I didn't completely mangle it, have leaked 13 gigabytes of internal documents belonging to French submarine manufacturer Naval Group. Everything from combat system source code and simulation software to weapons configurations and internal comms. Naval Group says it's found no evidence of a breach in its internal systems, but regardless, the data cat is out of the bag. Calling this a textbook case of navel gazing. Some experts are suggesting the breach may be due to an exploitation of an on-premises SharePoint server, which raises the question of military and defense organizations using the same types of vulnerable technology as the civilian sector. First off, kudos to our glorious producer, Steve Prentice, and Hadass Kasorla this week for fantastic submarine puns. But Derek, I'm curious, what are your thoughts?
I got, there's a lot going on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, so I'll pick on Microsoft here, right? Because it was a SharePoint, they're saying that it was potentially a SharePoint, vulnerability that led to this. But, Microsoft spends a lot of money and time and effort in getting those contracts because, they don't obviously want a lot of the military contractors, right? These are private individual companies that produce, hardware or they do engineering for the military of the nation that they work for. So the military itself is not. I mean, they do have engineering arms, but a lot of it's being done by these consultants and these contractors. So these organizations, they get approached by Microsoft, they get approached by AWS and all these big companies, and they spend a lot of time trying to get them to get on board with that product. So it's hard for us to say that should national secrets not be run on Microsoft products or AWS products. I don't know. I mean, what are the alternatives? I kind of go back to what I said earlier about some of these organizations having a small IT team, maybe not even having a robust like internal security mechanism. So who's going to maintain something that's not commercial off the shelf in favor of going to Microsoft and just kind of saying you guys secure it for us because we don't have the the capability to do it. But I think the bigger problem here is espionage, right? I mean, and that's I think we might talk about this a little bit later, but espionage is a huge problem these days with whether it's military secrets or just commercial IP. It's staggering in comparison to when back in the 50s and 1950s where KGB agents would have to sneak into some facility with a camera snuck into the heel of their shoe and then snap some pictures and make off with a couple pieces of film. Now it's you can steal entire databases of information in a matter of minutes, and so I think the scale is much different, and it's not like it's something that's ever going to go away. So there's a lot going on here. I don't know if there's an easy solution. So
yeah, I don't know if we want if the solution to this is government spins up its own hardened Linux complete ecosystem, like that seems completely infeasible at scale. And would the outcome be any better? Probably not.
And that does exist. I mean, there are,
Yeah.
the secure Linux. There is AWS, designed specifically for
Yeah,
federal.
they all have government SKUs for all of this
Right.
that are extra hardened or for military use.
But
and that
again,
kind of stuff.
that's not the commercial off the shelf type of applications and technology that a lot of people are accustomed to working with. And there's a learning curve there in some cases, depending on the technology. And it comes back down to who's going to maintain it, who's going to make sure that it's working appropriately, and is that really that much more secure than what you're already using? So,
All right, well, before we move on to our next story, we have to spend a few moments and thank our sponsor for today, DropZone AI. Security teams everywhere are drowning in alerts. That's why companies like Zapier and CBTS turn to DropZone AI, a leader in autonomous alert investigation. Their AI investigates everything, giving your analysts time back for real security work. No more 40-minute rabbit holes. If you're a black hat, find them in Startup City. Otherwise, check out their self-guided demo at DropZone AI. At dropzone.ai. This is how modern SOCs are scaling without burning out. That's DROPZONE.ai. All right, next up here, FBI and CISO warn about scattered spiders' evolving tactics. The FBI and CISO have issued an updated advisory warning that scattered spider remains a serious threat, using sophisticated social engineering and intrusion tactics, including phishing, MFA fatigue, SIM swapping, and ransomware like Dragon Force to breach systems, including encrypting VMware ESXi servers. Despite recent arrests tied to the gang, US, UK, Canadian, and Australian authorities emphasize that scattered spiders' evolving techniques continue to pose a big risk to national security and critical infrastructure. So Derek, scattered spider has certainly made a name for itself this year. Last week, we discussed their affiliation with the Com, which seems to consist of young and aggressive hackers. There are two kind of directions we could take here, maybe both here. One, kind of this growing power of youth-focused hacking groups like Scattered Spider and by extension the Com, or maybe the buried lead here of the story is MFA fatigue being a more serious threat than we give it credit for.
I mean, the MFA fatigue is definitely a real thing, because I have a routine when I get up in the morning. I come downstairs, I get in front of my desk, I start going through all my accounts to look at whether it's the social media accounts or bank accounts, whatever. I'm just checking on how things are going, whatever. And my phone, in the morning, I have 6 alerts, for MFAs, right? Because I mean, and they're legitimate. They're ones that I'm going through, but it's you're constantly being hit with MFA requests. So the MFA fatigue, I mean, that's a real problem. And we talk about psychological sorry, psychological acceptability when it comes to security is that if we make the bar too high for security, people are going to find ways to either circumvent it or find ways to just ignore it. And I think that, drives that point home of MFA fatigue where, yeah, if you're just constantly getting pinged for it, you just, whatever, I'm just going to, I just want to check, this one thing or whatever the case is. As far as Scatter Spider and the youth and getting younger a bench of hackers and attackers into the field. Some of that may have to do with and I'll just say this from the standpoint of like the U.S. Economy and where we are in terms of hiring. There's a lot of people with cybersecurity talent or technical talent that are struggling to find jobs, and unfortunately, like the old saying goes, idle hands are the devil's plaything, right? So if you don't give people some type of activity to channel their energy, they're going to find ways to channel it some way or another. I don't know if that's the case that's happening here, but it's certainly something that would be interesting to see the trends on that over time. Where if we're not giving people the appropriate outlet, they're going to find ways to fill that gap.
Yeah, and I would also say we're also seeing kind of a combination with that, right? Of maybe some underemployment of people curious in this field that are kind of either problem solvers or like to break things and take them apart, like get a satisfaction out of that. Combine that with the advent of modern LLMs, where even if you might, I don't necessarily know a ton about Python or whatever, coding language, whatever, but all of a sudden I can get fairly like I can get that shallow expertise that every LLM instantly gives you, and all of a sudden you don't have to be very sophisticated, but then you can start. It's a lot easier to get that ball rolling too, just from that end as well, even with the guardrails that are in place.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point.
All right, our last story for today here: supply chain attacks spotted on GitHub Actions, Gravity Forms, and NPM. Researchers at Armis Labs have uncovered major software supply chain attacks in GitHub Actions, the UA parser.js NPM package, and the Gravity Forms WordPress plugin, all involving backdoors or poison code that jeopardizes thousands of systems. These incidents remind us how trusted developer tools can be compromised and how AI-driven coding practices are being exploited. Experts warn that attackers can now backdoor vast numbers of software projects in days, making early detection and code integrity checks more critical than ever. I'm curious, Derek. We're seeing these we're seeing these we're seeing these crop up in the news a ton recently. What are your thoughts about these large scale vulnerabilities?
I was going to say these sort of feel like a dime a dozen anymore because there's constantly, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know that like there's thousands of NPM packages that are classified as malicious, that are found per year. But I remember when I was software developer many moons ago, that we had a very sort of well curated, because software was developed much differently back then, but a very well curated list of like, here are the products that we work with, here's what goes into our software. You could point to the the bill of materials on a application and say, yeah, I'd know what all those are. Now, today when you're building software, I mean, you have packages that are coming from everywhere. Those are just the direct dependencies, which all have their own dependencies, which are indirect dependencies, and those can number into the the hundreds, or depending on the size of your application, even into the thousands. And so you have this massive web of other people's code, right? You're really working with other people's code, and you have to trust that other code coming from all these different sources. And so attackers obviously are taking advantage of that trust that is there, because to be honest, not many people are following good software bill of material hygiene, where you're building prominence, you're building pedigree into your SBOM. You know where who's made the code changes, where it came from, when it was last updated, the dependencies that are all built into that. And so we don't have the technology's there. We can all do this today. But the follow through from many organizations just isn't there, and it leads to these types of unfortunate breaches. So
Devin McCarthy in our chat brings up, wonder if there will ever be a breaking point where SBOMs will be required. I don't even think that fundamentally solves the issue. I mean, certainly more visibility is better. But Derek, to your point, how deep does that go? Do you just have your dependencies, or do you have the dependencies of those dependencies? Then you're stacking turtles at that point. I also am fascinated with just the whole maintainer ecosystem in open source. That is an entirely different thing, where either maintainers are retiring, they're passing away. Ownership of those can change, and that completely changes something that was rock solid maybe for decades, all of a sudden into a security threat. Admittedly, an SBOM would make it much easier to find that, but yeah, those certainly all visibility good, but doesn't, to me at least, doesn't completely solve the issue. But
yeah, and that's where, again, like SBOM, to your point, SBOM gives you visibility, right? But like anything, you can have that visibility, but if you do nothing with it, it doesn't
yeah,
help. So
you can collect all the logs you want if you're not if you're not analyzing them exactly.
exactly. But yeah, I mean, one of the things was playing with this week is trying to develop an SBOM with prominence and pedigree built into it, and to generate the SBOM, like that's no problem. You take your code base, you generate the SBOM. That's not a big deal. It's getting all that additional metadata into there, and then actually doing something with it. So you did flag an unsigned package, or you were able to tag a package, based on maybe some threat intelligence that you have that says, okay, this potential package, even though it doesn't have a CVE listed, it looks like there's potential activity on it, whatever the case is. But that's where you have to have the processes, the technology, the checks in place to be able to act upon that when you get that information. So unfortunately, in SBOM, yes, it's great. You should be generating those. But without all the additional metadata, it's just information that you can use in a breach. When you need to find where the package is, but it's not going to help your overall process unless you build that intelligence in.
All right. Well, thank you to everybody that got involved in our chat today. Devin McCarthy, I see you in there getting in the chat. CCL, of course, one of our regulars, Kevin Farrell, Max Tronic, even getting in there, having some fun with the puns, as I like to say. We would love it if more people could come and join us in our live chat. It's a fun time. Nobody bites there, I promise. We're seeing new names pop in all the time, and makes it a ton of fun. Derek, before we get out of here, was there any story for you that was a thumbs up or a face palm for you? I feel like there's a couple face palm candidates. I'm not going to lie today.
Yeah, I think data sovereignty one is one that it's not really a face palm, but it was more like it's sort of obvious, but there's no obvious solution other than everyone just retreating to their borders, their digital borders, and that's it. So I think that's it's going to be a tricky problem that we're going to see a lot of chatter about in the near future, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely it feels like a staring contest right now, and companies are unfortunately kind of in the middle and hoping somebody blinks soon.
Right.
All right, Derek, where can people find you on the cyberspace if they are so inclined to give you a follow, see what you're up to?
Yep, you can find me on LinkedIn. And likewise, I have a Substack where I do try to keep up with it. Usually try to release something every other week if I can. But yeah, you can check me out there as well.
We have links to both of those in our show notes. Give them a subscribe on Substack, and you will not regret it. Thank you so much, Derek Fisher, Director of the Cyber Defense and Information Assurance Program at Temple University. Just dropping the knowledge, having a fun time, having a great Friday afternoon. Thank you so much for your time, and we hope to have you back soon.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks also to our sponsor for today, DropZone AI, the leader in autonomous alert investigation. Thank you again to our audience today. I know we can't get every comment up on the screen or address it on the show, but we deeply appreciate you being here and participating. It delights me to no end. And don't forget, you can send us feedback through electronic mail, feedback@CISOseries.com. We've been getting a little bit more into there. I love replying back, seeing what people are feeling about the shows. We love your feedback. Send it. Do not be shy. Please join us next week. First up for Super Cyber Friday, where our topic will be hacking toxic culture, an hour of critical thinking about how we poison the well in cybersecurity. That starts at 1 p.m. Eastern. Then come on back for another episode of the Week in Review that starts at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. To register for both, you can go to our events page at CISOseries.com. You can follow us on YouTube. Make sure you always catch us when we go live there as well. In the meantime, you can still get your daily news fix every day through cybersecurity headlines. It is available wherever you get podcasts. It takes about 6 minutes and you'll get all caught up. Until the next time we meet, for myself, for our glorious producer, Steve Prentice, for Derek Fisher, for all of us here in the CISO series organization conglomerate family, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.